This is the story of Muhammad Ali. You've heard the name. You know the legend. But his life was more than just boxing. It was a fight against the whole world, and he won that fight simply by being himself. Imagine a boy named Cassius Clay, growing up poor and black in segregated Kentucky. At age 12, someone stole his bicycle. That theft didn't just make him angry, it pointed him toward a boxing gym. And from that day on, nothing was ever the same. He went from a kid in Louisville to an Olympic champion. He became a professional boxer who moved like a dancer and talked a mile a minute. He called himself the Louisville Lip. He was fast, loud, and unbeatable. But then, everything changed. He joined the Nation of Islam and rejected his slave name. He became Muhammad Ali. He had the world in his hands, but he threw it all away to stand up for what he believed in. When the U.S. government drafted him to fight in the Vietnam War, he refused. He famously said, "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." He was stripped of his title. He lost years of his career. People called him a traitor. How did this man, hated by so many, fight his way back from exile to reclaim his crown in the most dramatic fights ever seen, the Rumble in the Jungle and the Thrilla in Manila? This biography explores the three lives of Muhammad Ali. The boxer, the genius who changed fighting forever. The activist, the man who risked everything for his faith and his people. The icon, the global ambassador whose kindness and courage became even more powerful after he developed Parkinson's disease. Ali's story is about courage. It's about speaking up when everyone tells you to shut up. It's about falling down and getting back up, again and again. By the end of this journey, you'll understand why he was, and always will be, the greatest. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Roots in Louisville. The man who would become the world's most famous athlete, Muhammad Ali, started life as Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. He was born on January 17, 1942, in Louisville, Kentucky. But the Louisville of his childhood was a city sharply divided by the color line. A modest, segregated beginning. Cassius Jr. was the firstborn son of Cassius Marcellus Clay Sr. and Odessa Grady Clay. The Clay family lived a relatively stable, though far from wealthy, life in the city's West End. His father, Cassius Sr., was a talented and volatile man who earned a living as a sign painter and muralist. He painted religious scenes and advertisements, but the opportunities for a black artist in the South were limited, and his talent was often undervalued. Cassius Sr. struggled with alcohol, a dynamic that created a tense atmosphere at home. His mother, Odessa, was the true emotional bedrock of the family. She was a gentle, deeply religious woman who worked as a domestic housekeeper to help support Cassius Jr. and his younger brother, Rudolph, who would later change his name to Rahman Ali. Odessa provided the constant warmth, stability, and unconditional love that Cassius Jr. would carry with him his entire life. Despite the love at home, the moment Cassius stepped outside, he faced the harsh realities of segregation. Louisville was a Jim Crow city. Black people were restricted to certain neighborhoods, could not use the same water fountains or restrooms as white citizens, and were often treated with open contempt. For young Cassius, the world was clearly split between the white side and the black side, and that inequality simmered just beneath the surface of his confident exterior. The stolen bicycle. The pivotal moment that launched Cassius Clay's career occurred when he was 12 years old. It was a cold, rainy day in 1954, and Cassius and a friend rode their brand-new, cherished red and white Schwinn bicycle to the Louisville home show. When the boys came out, the bike was gone. Furious and heartbroken, Cassius rushed into the building, tears streaming down his face, searching for a police officer. He found an off-duty policeman named Joe Martin, who was also a white boxing trainer. Cassius, shaking with rage, pointed at the man in uniform and declared, "I'm going to whip the person who stole my bike." Joe Martin, used to dealing with neighborhood squabbles, looked at the scrawny, trembling boy and offered a piece of advice that would change history: "You better learn how to fight before you go whipping anybody." Cassius, still burning with indignation, insisted, "I can fight. I'm going to beat him up." Martin, half-jokingly, invited the boy to come to the gym he ran in the basement of the Columbia Auditorium. Cassius showed up the very next day. The discovery of Joe Martin. Joe Martin was more than just a boxing trainer. He was a coach for the Louisville Department of Parks and Recreation, running the free program, Tomorrow's Champions. He quickly realized the skinny, energetic boy was something special. Cassius, at first, was disorganized, undisciplined, and hyperactive. But he was also exceptionally fast and, more importantly, he was determined. He dedicated himself to the gym. Martin taught him the fundamentals: how to move, how to throw a proper jab, and how to protect himself. Within a few short weeks, the boy who came in looking for revenge had found a new direction, a purpose, and a stage. The boxing ring offered Cassius Clay a rare opportunity, a place where effort and skill transcended the rules of segregation. A place where a young black man from the West End could use his body and his mind to beat anybody, regardless of their skin color. This accidental meeting over a stolen bicycle was the true genesis of the legend. It turned a moment of childish rage into a lifelong discipline, setting Cassius Clay Jr. on the path to becoming Muhammad Ali, the greatest. Chapter 2: The Amateur Phenom. Once Cassius Clay stepped inside Joe Martin's gym, the chaotic energy he had once channeled into street scuffles found focus. He wasn't just working out, he was obsessed. His dedication was immediate and total, distinguishing him from the other boys who came and went. Early training and discipline. Clay's early training was defined by grueling work and a unique natural talent. Trainer Joe Martin, and later the influential Fred Stoner, instilled the core discipline Clay needed. Stoner, an experienced black trainer, refined Clay's style, forcing him to keep his hands up and teaching him the necessity of footwork. But even at a young age, Clay resisted the classic, flat-footed boxer stance. He was tall for his weight class, but instead of using that reach in a traditional way, he started developing his own approach, fast, rhythmic, and incredibly light on his feet. He had an innate ability to move his head just enough to avoid a punch, sometimes seemingly smiling as the blows sailed past his ear. More than his physical gifts, Clay possessed an extraordinary mental drive. He was often the first one in the gym and the last one to leave. He knew he had to be perfect, not just because he wanted to win, but because he was starting to realize how big his talent was. Amateur dominance and the Golden Gloves. Cassius Clay quickly became a phenomenon on the amateur circuit. His style was unorthodox, his speed was baffling, and his wins started piling up. By the late 1950s, he was virtually unbeatable in the youth divisions. His amateur record was astonishing. He finished his non-professional career with an official count of 100 wins and only 5 losses. The pinnacle of his domestic amateur success came in the prestigious Golden Gloves Championships. He won the National Golden Gloves title twice, in 1959 and 1960, solidifying his reputation as the best young boxer in America. He wasn't just winning, he was turning heads with his unusual, flashy movements. It was during these years that he started honing the rhyming and trash-talking that would become his trademark, earning him the nickname, the Louisville Lip. The 1960 Rome Olympics. The ultimate prize for any amateur fighter was the Olympics, and in 1960, Cassius Clay achieved it. At just 18 years old, he traveled to Rome, Italy, to represent the United States in the light heavyweight division. Clay was not just the favorite, he was the center of attention. He was so nervous about the plane ride to Rome that he nearly backed out, finally agreeing to fly only after securing a parachute and wearing it throughout the entire flight. But once he landed, his confidence returned, and he charmed everyone he met, from fellow athletes to reporters. He traded pins, signed autographs, and basked in the international spotlight. In the ring, he was masterful. He tore through the competition, culminating in the gold medal match against Poland's Zbigniew Pietrzakowski. Clay dominated the fight, overwhelming the veteran Pole with blistering hand speed and constant movement. He won the gold medal by unanimous decision. The moment he won, Cassius Clay was overcome with joy. He was an American hero. He wore his medal everywhere he went, even while sleeping, showing it off to anyone who would look. The medal and the reality of racism. The story goes that when Cassius Clay returned to Louisville, wearing his prized gold medal, he went into a segregated restaurant for a celebration meal. Despite his achievement, the waitress refused to serve him, telling him, "We don't serve N***** heirs here." In a rage fueled by the hypocrisy of being hailed as a hero abroad only to be treated as a second-class citizen at home, the young man supposedly walked to the Ohio River and threw his gold medal into the water. While this dramatic moment is a powerful symbol of the pain of segregation, the story is widely disputed by biographers and Ali himself in later life. Regardless of the literal truth, the emotional truth of the incident remains. The Olympic glory could not shield him from the racism that defined his hometown. The contrast was stark. He was celebrated by the world for his speed and skill, yet he was denied basic dignity in the place he called home. This bitter realization fueled a deep, growing frustration in the young champion, setting the stage for the enormous political and social transformation that was just around the corner. The amateur career was over. The talent was undeniable. Now, it was time to turn professional and see if the Louisville Lip could become the king.
If you're enjoying the story of how Cassius Clay became a champion, please take a quick moment to support the EchoLib channel. Like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of Ali's incredible life. And let us know in the comments, what part of Ali's journey are you most excited to hear next? Now, let's get back to the story, as Clay transitions from amateur phenom to professional legend in Chapter 3.
Chapter 3, Turning Professional. The shine of the Olympic gold was still bright, but Cassius Clay's sights were now set on the professional ring. If he wanted to force the world to respect him, he had to make money, and he had to win the biggest prize in sports. The business of boxing. Right after the 1960 Olympics, Clay went pro. He signed a contract with the Louisville Sponsoring Group, LSG, a collection of 11 wealthy local businessmen. This unique arrangement gave Clay the security of strong financial backing, starting with a $10,000 signing bonus. Clay's professional debut was a win in late 1960. For the next 3 years, he fought often, compiling a perfect 19-0 record. He was constantly on the road, learning how to handle the pressure of big crowds and tough opponents. He showed heart and resilience, but he needed a trainer who understood his unique speed. A new style and a new team. That critical partnership was formed with Angelo Dundee, a respected trainer in Miami. Unlike old-school coaches who wanted to mold Clay into a traditional, heavy-hitting boxer, Dundee saw the future in Clay's natural gifts. Clay was tall, but he was incredibly light on his feet. He began perfecting a revolutionary fighting style. Instead of keeping his hands high to block punches, Clay often kept them low, relying on his lightning-fast head movement and footwork to dodge opponents. It looked reckless, but it was pure genius. He didn't just stand there, he used the entire ring like a stage. This approach was perfectly captured in the poetic phrase that defined his ring work: float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. He used movement and finesse as his primary defense, saving his powerful fists for quick, accurate strikes. The Louisville Lip is born. If Clay was a genius in the ring, he was a master promoter outside of it. He understood that being the best wasn't enough, he had to be the most talked about. He became the Louisville Lip. He specialized in trash-talking and psychological warfare. He would shout at opponents, mock them, and, most famously, compose rhyming poems that predicted the exact round in which they would be knocked out. He would scream, "They all fall in the round I call." This persona created a massive circus around every single one of his fights. Critics hated his arrogance, but audiences couldn't look away. His taunts weren't just for show, they served a purpose. He infuriated his opponents, clouding their judgment and often beating them mentally long before the first bell even rang. By 1964, Cassius Clay was the most famous, most hated, and most exciting contender in the world. The time for small fights was over. He had the skill, the confidence, and the hype. Now, he was coming for the baddest man on the planet, world heavyweight champion Sonny Liston. Chapter 4, The Road to Sonny Liston. Cassius Clay had done everything right. He was undefeated, he was famous, and he was loud. But for the boxing establishment and the general public, he was still just a clown. To be taken seriously, he had to take down the most frightening figure in American sports, Sonny Liston. The intimidating champion. Sonny Liston was the antithesis of Clay. He was not flashy, he was silent, powerful, and utterly terrifying. Liston had won the title by brutally knocking out Floyd Patterson in the first round, twice. Liston seemed indestructible, an emotionless force of nature with an unbreakable stare and a heavy left hook. Liston also carried a dark reputation. He was known to have connections to the criminal underworld, and his presence alone intimidated opponents into submission. When the idea of Clay fighting Liston was first proposed, almost everyone predicted a quick, violent knockout for the champion. Clay was seen as too fast, yes, but too weak to handle Liston's sheer power. Psychological warfare, the final attack. The title bout was set for February 25, 1964, in Miami Beach. Clay was a massive 7-1 underdog. Knowing that Liston was a man who relied on intimidation, Clay decided to attack the champion's mind first. He turned the pressure dial up to maximum. He followed Liston around town, taunting him relentlessly. He drove a bus with painted insults to Liston's training camp, screaming poems like, "Liston is great, but he'll fall in 8." He called him, the Big Ugly Bear. The final, most dramatic act of this psychological campaign happened at the official pre-fight weigh-in. Clay acted completely unhinged. He screamed, ranted, rolled his eyes, and lunged wildly at Liston. He had to be physically restrained by his team. His pulse rate shot up dangerously high. The performance was so convincing that reporters rushed to print stories saying the young challenger was genuinely terrified and suffering a nervous breakdown. Doctors seriously considered ruling him medically unfit to fight. Clay had successfully convinced the world, and perhaps even Liston himself, that he was too emotionally unstable to pose a threat. It was a brilliant, calculated piece of acting. Shocking the world in Miami Beach. When the bell rang, all the showmanship ended. Cassius Clay, completely calm, put on a boxing clinic. He refused to let Liston get close. He danced, he moved, he jabbed, and he evaded Liston's bone-crushing power. The champion could not hit the target. By the third round, Liston's face was cut, and his frustration was obvious. In the middle rounds, Clay faced a huge crisis. He suddenly couldn't see, a temporary blinding agent, possibly ointment from Liston's corner, had gotten into his eyes. Clay panicked, yelling that he couldn't see and threatening to quit. Angelo Dundee calmed his fighter, forced him to weather the storm, and wiped his eyes clean. By the start of the 6th round, Clay's vision was back, and he renewed his assault. Liston, battered, beaten, and exhausted from chasing the younger man, slumped onto his stool at the end of the 6th round. He refused to answer the bell for the 7th. Sonny Liston, the most feared man in boxing, had quit. I shook up the world. The stadium erupted. The impossible had happened. The loud, young challenger had defeated the silent, intimidating giant. Clay exploded with pure, unadulterated joy. He rushed to the ropes, pointed at the stunned reporters, and screamed the words that would become part of his legend. I shook up the world. I am the greatest. I'm the king of the world. Eat your words. Cassius Clay, at just 22 years old, was the new heavyweight champion. He had achieved his dream. But on the very next morning, the world was about to find out that the man they thought they knew was already gone. His professional triumph was immediately overshadowed by a much larger, and much more serious, identity change. Chapter 5, Becoming Muhammad Ali. The morning after Cassius Clay beat Sonny Liston, he was the biggest boxing star on the planet. But he didn't wake up thinking about his championship belt, he woke up ready to make a much deeper transformation. Joining the Nation of Islam. For several years leading up to the Liston fight, Clay had been secretly attending meetings of the Nation of Islam, NOI, a religious and political group in the United States. The NOI preached black nationalism, self-reliance, and rejected the idea of integration into white society, which they viewed as corrupt and racist. The NOI gave Cassius a powerful framework for understanding the discrimination he had faced back in Louisville and even as an Olympic hero. He found purpose and strength in their strict discipline and message of racial pride. His mentor within the Nation of Islam was the charismatic and brilliant leader Malcolm X. Malcolm X, at the time, was the most visible and controversial spokesman for the NOI. Clay found in Malcolm a passionate teacher who helped him understand his place in the world and gave him the courage to reject white authority. Malcolm X was present in Miami the night Clay won the title, signaling the depth of their bond. The name change. Just days after his victory, Cassius Clay held a press conference that immediately overshadowed his boxing triumph. He announced two things: he was a member of the Nation of Islam, and he was rejecting his birth name, calling it a slave name. He first took the name Cassius X, following the NOI tradition of replacing a surname given by slave owners with an X, symbolizing an unknown, lost African ancestry. Soon after, the spiritual leader of the Nation of Islam, Elijah Muhammad, bestowed upon him the name he would carry for the rest of his life, Muhammad Ali. The name means, one who is worthy of praise, and Most High. Public backlash and media fury. The public reaction was instantaneous and overwhelmingly negative. For mainstream white America, who had just started to tolerate Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali was a bridge too far. The Nation of Islam was widely feared and considered a radical fringe group. To many, Ali's name change felt like a deliberate act of betrayal and arrogance. Sports writers, in particular, refused to use the name Muhammad Ali for years, stubbornly referring to him as Cassius Clay or the former heavyweight champion. They saw his religious conversion as a marketing stunt, not a sincere spiritual choice. For civil rights groups like the NAACP, the conversion was also divisive. While they were fighting for integration and equality, the NOI advocated separation. This left Ali caught in the middle, celebrated by some black youth for his uncompromising pride, but rejected by others who felt his actions hurt the mainstream civil rights movement. The bonds that broke. Ali's deep friendship with Malcolm X soon faced a major crisis. Shortly after Ali took his new name, Malcolm X began to publicly distance himself from the NOI and Elijah Muhammad, accusing the leadership of corruption. Faced with a choice between his spiritual leader, Elijah Muhammad, and his beloved mentor, Malcolm X, Ali chose Elijah Muhammad. Following the Nation of Islam's orders, Ali publicly shunned Malcolm X. This was a painful, permanent split. When Malcolm X was assassinated in February 1965, the public shunning became one of the most painful regrets of Ali's life. Despite the chaos and backlash, Muhammad Ali was now fully formed. He was no longer just the Louisville Lip, he was a serious figure, a defiant religious champion and a political symbol who wore his faith and his pride like a second crown. His fight against the forces of Liston had ended, but his true, lifelong battle against the forces of conformity had just begun. Chapter 6, Champion and Controversy. Muhammad Ali was now the heavyweight champion, but the title came with a massive new cost: relentless public hostility. He was no longer just a loud boxer, he was a leader in a controversial religious movement, and the media storm around him was constant. First marriage and the phantom punch. Ali's personal life changed quickly. In 1964, he married his first wife, Sonny Roy, a cocktail waitress. Roy was initially drawn to Ali's confidence, but the marriage was turbulent and brief. Sonny struggled to adapt to the strict rules of the Nation of Islam, particularly the dress code and religious expectations. Their marriage ended after just 17 months, a sign of the immense pressure and the radical life change Ali was undergoing. In the ring, he faced the man he had already beaten, Sonny Liston. The rematch was held in May 1965 in Lewiston, Maine. This fight would become one of the most disputed and legendary moments in boxing history. Just over a minute into the first round, Ali unleashed a lightning-fast right hand that knocked Liston down. Many spectators didn't even see the blow, leading to its famous name, the Phantom Punch. The referee, former champion Jersey Joe Walcott, struggled to maintain order amidst the chaos. Liston was eventually counted out, and Ali retained his title. Critics immediately cried foul, claiming the fight was fixed due to Liston's known connections to the mob. The win was questioned, but the belt stayed with Ali. Defending the crown. Following the controversial Liston rematch, Ali began a campaign to prove his legitimacy, quickly defending his title against a succession of tough challengers. These fights were crucial in cementing his status as a brilliant boxer, separating him from the media controversy. Key defenses during this period included Floyd Patterson, 1965. Patterson, a former champion, openly insulted Ali by refusing to use his new name and declaring himself the only true American champion. Ali inflicted a humiliating, drawn-out punishment before winning by TKO, a brutal lesson in pride. Henry Cooper, 1966. A rematch against the British fan favorite in which Ali demonstrated his incredible precision. Cleveland Williams, 1966. A breathtaking display of speed and power where Ali utterly dominated Williams, winning in the third round. This performance is still considered one of the most perfect displays of Ali's boxing artistry. Ernie Terrell, 1967. Terrell repeatedly called Ali, Clay. Ali made him pay, holding him up and demanding between punches, "What's my name? What's my name?" He won a cruel, 15-round decision, demonstrating that his battles were deeply personal and tied to his identity. Growing fame and media treatment. During this reign, Ali's star power skyrocketed globally. He was handsome, charismatic, and undeniably one of the most exciting athletes in the world. Yet, the media treatment was consistently hostile. Newspapers and television focused on his affiliation with the Nation of Islam, often portraying him as a loudmouthed radical who did not deserve the championship. His confidence was viewed as arrogance, his faith as fanaticism, and his poetry as buffoonery. But for many Black Americans and fans abroad, Ali was becoming an increasingly important symbol of uncompromising pride and defiance against the white establishment. As 1966 turned into 1967, Muhammad Ali was at the peak of his boxing powers. He was wealthy, famous, and dominant. But looming over his career was a massive, unavoidable issue: the war in Vietnam and the American military draft. The moment of truth, which would force him to choose between his career and his conscience, was fast approaching. Chapter 7: The Stand. By early 1966, Muhammad Ali was an undisputed champion, but the world around him was changing rapidly. The Vietnam War was escalating, and the United States was sending more and more young men to fight in Southeast Asia. This war would force Ali to make the most difficult decision of his life, one that would cost him everything, but ultimately define his legacy. The draft and reclassification. Ali had initially been classified 1Y by the Selective Service System in 1964, meaning he was deemed unfit for military service due to failing a written intelligence test. The media used this to mock him, calling him unintelligent. However, as the war intensified, the draft rules changed. In 1966, the Selective Service reclassified Ali to 1A, making him eligible for military service. This meant Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion of the world, was now expected to join the army and go to Vietnam. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." Ali's immediate response was defiance. He publicly declared his opposition to the war, not just as a conscientious objector, but with a powerful, direct statement that resonated deeply with the burgeoning anti-war movement and the Black community. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong." No Viet Cong ever called me an ************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* immediately famous and profoundly controversial. It connected the struggle for civil rights at home with the fight abroad, suggesting that the enemy for Black Americans was not in Vietnam, but in the racial injustice within the United States. He explained his stance was rooted in his beliefs as a Muslim minister: war is against the teachings of the Holy Quran. I'm not trying to dodge the draft. We are not supposed to take part in wars unless declared by Allah or the Messenger. We don't take part in Christian wars or wars of any infidels. Religious and moral objections. Ali's stand was not just political, it was deeply religious and moral. As a devoted member of the Nation of Islam, he believed that fighting in a war not sanctioned by his faith was forbidden. He saw the war as a conflict that disproportionately affected poor Americans and people of color, sending them to fight for a country that still denied them full rights at home. His position garnered strong support from the anti-war movement and many within the Black community who felt the same way. He was an outspoken hero for those who opposed the war and fought for racial justice. However, mainstream white America, already critical of Ali's Nation of Islam affiliation, reacted with fury. He was branded a draft dodger, a traitor, and unpatriotic. Newspapers called for his title to be stripped, and public opinion polls showed widespread disapproval of his stance. He was reviled by those who supported the war and felt he was disrespecting the troops. His decision polarized the nation even further. Ali, however, refused to back down. He was steadfast in his conviction, fully aware of the immense consequences. He knew that his choice would likely mean the end of his boxing career, but his faith and principles meant more than any championship belt. The stage was now set for the ultimate showdown, not in a boxing ring, but in a military induction office. Chapter 8, Exile. The year 1967 brought Muhammad Ali to the most difficult and consequential decision of his young life. His refusal to back down from his anti-war, religious beliefs led directly to his darkest period, 3.5 years of professional exile. Refusing induction. The moment of truth arrived on April 28, 1967, in Houston, Texas. Ali arrived at the Armed Forces Examining and Induction Center, fully aware that a line had been drawn. His attorneys had worked to delay the process, but the time for decision had come. When his name was called to step forward for induction into the U.S. Army, Ali refused. He remained seated. He declined 3 more official requests to step forward, grounding his refusal in his faith as a Muslim minister. The consequences were immediate and severe. Stripped of title, within hours, the New York State Athletic Commission stripped him of his heavyweight title. Other boxing commissions quickly followed suit. Boxing license revoked. His boxing license was immediately revoked across every state in the U.S., effectively banning him from practicing his profession. Criminal conviction and appeal. The legal battle began immediately. Ali was arrested and charged with the felony offense of willfully refusing induction. In June 1967, he was found guilty by a jury that took only 21 minutes to deliberate. He was sentenced to the maximum penalty, 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Ali immediately posted bond and began the long, drawn-out appeal process, which allowed him to remain free, but kept him under the constant shadow of a prison sentence. The loss of prime years. Ali was just 25 years old when he was stripped of his title. He was entering his absolute physical prime, the years when a heavyweight champion is typically at their most dominant, ages 25 to 28. Instead of earning millions in the ring, he was unable to fight professionally anywhere in the world. This loss was incalculable. It wasn't just about the money, it was the loss of the opportunity to define his legacy against the top competition of his era. For years, the world was robbed of seeing the greatest at his peak. Speaking tour and new activism. With his boxing career abruptly shut down, Ali had to find a new way to make a living and, just as importantly, to keep his voice heard. He became a leading figure on the college lecture circuit. Traveling across the United States, Ali spoke to thousands of students and activists. He was articulate, witty, and passionate. He spoke about race, religion, the draft, and the war, giving a powerful face to the growing anti-establishment movement. The same media that had criticized him now gave him a platform as a major political speaker. He transitioned from being just a boxer to being a full-time activist and speaker. This period of exile, though professionally devastating, cemented his role as a cultural and moral figurehead. A new family. Amidst the legal chaos, Ali's personal life found stability. He married his second wife, Belinda Boyd, who later changed her name to Khalila Ali, in 1967. The marriage was stable, and the couple had 4 children together. Khalila, a devout Muslim, provided the support Ali needed during these dark, uncertain years. Despite the poverty and the constant threat of prison, Ali's conviction never wavered. He chose his faith and his conscience over his career, a decision that would forever alter his life and ensure his place as a hero of principled defiance. But the fight to return to the ring, and to clear his name, was far from over. Chapter 9, Return to the Ring. For 3.5 years, Muhammad Ali was denied the right to practice his profession. He was banned, convicted, and threatened with prison, but he refused to surrender his beliefs. By 1970, the political winds were finally beginning to shift, and the nation was growing weary of the Vietnam War. Ali's principled stand, once widely condemned, now earned him growing respect. The Supreme Court and ring return. The first sign of hope came on procedural rather than constitutional grounds. Ali's long legal fight culminated when the Supreme Court of the United States finally agreed to hear his appeal. While that process moved slowly, public opinion, and the boxing business, moved faster. Promoters, eager for the massive financial spectacle Ali represented, found ways to bring him back. In 1970, with his legal status still uncertain, Ali was granted a license to fight in Atlanta, Georgia. This marked the official end of his exile. His first fight back, on October 26, 1970, was against top-ranked contender Jerry Quarry. There was intense speculation about his skill. Could a 28-year-old boxer, relying on speed and reflexes, return after so long away? Had the ring rust permanently dimmed his brilliance? The answer was a definitive no. Ali looked sharp, fast, and powerful, winning after 3 rounds when a serious cut forced Quarry to retire. The king was back. The fight of the century. The victory over Quarry was just the appetizer. The fight the world truly wanted was a title unification bout against the new heavyweight champion, Joe Frazier. Frazier was Ali's complete opposite in the ring, a relentless, powerful pressure fighter who constantly moved forward, hitting hard with a devastating left hook. Frazier had earned the title legitimately while Ali was in exile and deeply resented Ali's taunts, including being called a white man's champion. Their rivalry was deep, personal, and fueled by political tension. Ali represented the anti-establishment black pride, while Frazier represented the hard-working, mainstream black American who earned his way. The fight, held on March 8, 1971, in Madison Square Garden, was an event unlike any other. It was dubbed the fight of the century. First loss and the rivalry. The fight was a brutal, 15-round masterpiece. Ali started fast, controlling the early rounds with his jab. But Frazier's relentless pressure proved overwhelming, and his power punches did damage. In the final, deciding 15th round, Frazier delivered the moment of the fight, a thunderous left hook that dropped Ali. Ali struggled back to his feet, but the knockdown sealed the decision. Joe Frazier won by unanimous decision, handing Ali his first professional defeat. The psychological impact on Ali was immense. The invincible, rhyming champion had been beaten. However, the defeat also hardened him. The loss created one of the greatest rivalries in sports history, defining both men for the rest of their lives. Despite the loss, Ali proved he was still a world-class fighter. Now, he faced a new, unfamiliar role, the challenger, embarking on a quest not just for the belt, but for redemption against the man who had humbled him. Chapter 10: The Quest for Redemption. The loss to Joe Frazier in the fight of the century didn't end Muhammad Ali's career, it redefined it. For the next 3 years, Ali was a man obsessed, driven by a singular goal: to prove that his defeat was a mistake and to regain the heavyweight championship. The Revenge Tour. Ali immediately dedicated himself to a grueling revenge tour. He needed to climb back up the rankings and, more importantly, prove he was still the most dangerous man in boxing. He fought constantly, traveling the world and defeating opponent after opponent. He took on world-class fighters like Bob Foster, Jerry Quarry, again, and Ken Norton. The fight against Ken Norton in March 1973 was a painful setback. Norton, a powerful contender, broke Ali's jaw early in the fight and won a split decision. The loss was shocking, proving that Ali was now beatable and his reflexes, after the long layoff, were indeed slowing. However, Ali came back just 6 months later, defeating Norton in a rematch to set his path straight again. The Frazier rematch, non-title. The path to redemption required going through Frazier again. On January 28, 1974, Ali and Frazier met for their second, non-title fight in Madison Square Garden. The build-up was intense and personal. Before the fight, the two men even scuffled in a television studio. The fight itself was tactical, tense, and less dramatic than their first brutal war. Ali used his footwork and speed to frustrate Frazier, controlling the distance and clinching often to neutralize Frazier's powerful left hook. This time, Ali dominated the middle rounds and won by unanimous decision. The score was settled at 1 win apiece. Ali had his revenge, but Joe Frazier was no longer the champion. The man holding the title was now a seemingly unbeatable force. George Foreman and the Enter King. While Ali and Frazier were locked in their rivalry, a monstrous new heavyweight had emerged, George Foreman. Foreman was less a boxer and more a destroyer. He was huge, frighteningly strong, and had crushed both Joe Frazier and Ken Norton in 2 rounds apiece. Foreman's powerful, straightforward style made him look truly invincible. For Ali to reclaim his crown, he had to face Foreman, and almost no one gave Ali a chance. The fear was that Foreman would simply overpower the older, slightly slower Ali. Around this time, a flamboyant, fast-talking promoter named Don King entered the picture. With his wild hair and electric energy, King specialized in making the impossible happen. He secured a massive, unprecedented sum of money for the fight by partnering with the government of Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The stage was set for a showdown that was more than a title fight, it was a cultural event, bringing a global spectacle to the heart of Africa. It was scheduled for late 1974. Muhammad Ali was once again the massive underdog, facing a younger, stronger, and more devastating opponent. He was going to the deepest part of the continent to seek the ultimate redemption and complete his comeback. The whole world was watching, waiting to see if Ali could truly shake up the world one last time. Chapter 11: Rumble in the Jungle. Setting the stage in Zaire. The world was preparing for the biggest boxing spectacle in history, the showdown between the former champion, Muhammad Ali, and the undefeated, devastating current champion, George Foreman. The fight, orchestrated by promoter Don King and financed by the government of Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of the Congo, was named the Rumble in the Jungle. The fight was scheduled for October 30, 1974, in Kinshasa, Zaire. King lured the fighters with a staggering $5 million purse for each man, an astronomical sum at the time. The setting was crucial. Foreman, younger and stronger, was widely feared. He had dismantled every opponent in his path, including Ali's nemesis, Joe Frazier. Ali, at 32, was considered too old and too slow to withstand Foreman's raw power. Once again, Ali was the massive underdog. The people's champion. The atmosphere in Zaire was electric. Ali, embracing the African connection, immediately captivated the local people. He spent weeks engaging with the crowds, running through the streets, and practicing his rhymes. He adopted the chant, Ali, Boma Yi, which translates to, Ali, kill him. The Zairian people saw Ali not just as a boxer, but as a symbolic figure, a black Muslim challenging the Western-backed establishment. Meanwhile, Foreman arrived quietly and stayed mostly isolated, training in seclusion. The contrast solidified the public narrative. Ali was the charismatic man of the people, while Foreman was the quiet, cold destroyer. Ali's psychological war was winning before a single punch was thrown. The rope-a-dope strategy. The strategy Ali's corner devised for Foreman was considered suicidal by most experts. Foreman was a powerhouse who often knocked opponents out quickly. Logically, Ali needed to stay away from the champion's blows. But Ali planned to do the opposite. When the fight began, Ali used his speed for the first round, dancing and circling. Then, surprisingly, he retreated to the ropes. This became known as the rope-a-dope strategy. Ali leaned back on the ropes, covering his head and vital organs, allowing Foreman to unleash barrage after barrage of punches. The ropes absorbed some of the impact, but Ali took a tremendous beating. He whispered taunts to the champion, urging him on. "Is that all you got, George? They told me you could punch." The strategy was brilliant and brutal. Foreman, used to quick knockouts, was forced to expend enormous amounts of energy swinging wildly at a nearly static target. The Kinshasa humidity, combined with the extreme effort, began to drain Foreman rapidly. Ali was absorbing the punishment, but he was conserving his energy and watching Foreman tire himself out. Reclaiming the crown. By the 7th round, Foreman's punches had slowed to sluggish pushes, and his face showed exhaustion and confusion. Ali had gambled everything on his own ability to endure the pain, and the gamble was paying off. In the 8th round, Ali saw his opening. Foreman stumbled, winded and unable to lift his arms. Ali suddenly launched off the ropes with a flurry of rapid-fire punches, a straight right, followed by a combination, ending with a crushing right hand. Foreman stumbled, twirled completely around, and crashed to the canvas. Foreman could not get up. He was counted out. Muhammad Ali had done the impossible. He had knocked out the most feared heavyweight in the world, becoming only the second man in history to reclaim the heavyweight championship. It was the ultimate validation of his skill, his mind, and his incredible resilience. The "Rumble in the Jungle" wasn't just a sporting event, it was a global phenomenon that transcended boxing, elevating Ali from controversial figure to an enduring icon of courage and self-belief. Chapter 12, The Thrilla in Manila. After reclaiming the title from George Foreman, Muhammad Ali was once again the undisputed heavyweight champion. But the legendary rivalry with Joe Frazier still needed a definitive end. They were tied at 1 win each, and the world demanded a rubber match. Completing the trilogy. The third and final meeting between the two titans, fittingly nicknamed the Thrilla in Manila by promoter Don King, was scheduled for October 1, 1975. The fight was held in Quezon City, Philippines, and started at 10:45 a.m. local time to accommodate the lucrative American pay-per-view audience, meaning the boxers fought under the intense, oppressive tropical heat. The personal animosity had only intensified since their last bout. Ali relentlessly mocked Frazier in the media, calling him a gorilla and a pig. While Ali's trash talk was usually theatrical, his insults toward Frazier were often genuinely cruel and deeply hurtful, leaving a lasting scar on Frazier's heart. Frazier entered the ring not just seeking a championship, but seeking revenge for the years of public humiliation. The brutal nature of the fight. If the first fight was a tactical war and the second was a technical decision, the third was a savage, relentless duel of attrition. Ali started fast, dominating the early rounds with his trademark speed and combination punching, looking like he might end the fight early. But Frazier was Joe Frazier. He absorbed the punishment and, starting around the 6th round, began to relentlessly cut off the ring. He trapped Ali against the ropes and pounded him mercilessly with his trademark left hook and heavy body shots. The middle rounds were a blur of intense, sustained brutality. Ali was relying on the rope-a-dope, but Frazier was younger than Foreman and far more accurate. Ali later admitted that he had reached a point of exhaustion and pain he had never known before. He dug deep into his soul just to stay upright. The ultimate toll. As the fight reached the championship rounds, 12 through 14, both men were barely standing. Frazier's face was horribly swollen, his eyes were nearly closed from Ali's stinging jabs. Ali, though still moving, was physically drained, his verbal taunts replaced by labored breathing. They traded devastating blows in the center of the ring, each unwilling to concede. By the end of the 14th round, the fight had become an unholy test of willpower. Frazier, stumbling back to his corner, was virtually blind. His trainer, Eddie Futch, looked into his fighter's completely closed, damaged eyes. Futch, knowing that Frazier would fight until he died, made the agonizing decision to stop the fight. He waved his hand to the referee, preventing Frazier from answering the bell for the 15th and final round. Muhammad Ali was declared the winner. The closest thing to dying. The moment Futch stopped the fight, Ali raised his hands in victory. Then immediately collapsed in exhaustion on his stool. He was so spent that he later confessed that if Frazier's corner hadn't stopped the fight, he would have. Ali described the fight as the closest thing to dying he had ever experienced. The physical toll on both men was profound. For Ali, the fight may have won the war against Frazier, but it arguably exacted a heavier long-term price on his health than any other bout. It was the absolute peak of his competitive spirit, but it was a peak paid for with permanent damage. The Thrilla in Manila settled the greatest rivalry in boxing history, confirming Ali's greatness but marking the beginning of the slow physical decline that would plague his later career. Chapter 13, The Champion's Decline. Following the brutal Thrilla in Manila, in 1975, Muhammad Ali was the undisputed heavyweight king, but the physical price he paid in that trilogy was staggering. He continued to fight, but the beautiful, elusive, float like a butterfly style was slowly being replaced by a heavier, slower approach. Notable title defenses. In the mid-1970s, Ali continued to defend his championship, traveling the globe for major paydays. However, many of these fights lacked the brilliance and intensity of his earlier years. He was no longer relying solely on his speed. Instead, he often used the rope-a-dope strategy more frequently, absorbing blows and relying on his incredible chin and resilience. While this strategy won fights, it came at a high cost, subjecting his body and brain to constant, unnecessary punishment. He often coasted through fights, only turning on the intensity when needed. His focus was also shifting. Ali was making huge money, becoming a global celebrity, and dealing with complicated personal and financial demands. The absolute, singular dedication to training that defined his youth was beginning to fade. The warning signs. Toward the end of 1977, the signs of physical deterioration were becoming apparent. His movements were less fluid, his speech was becoming slightly slurred, and he was taking more punches than ever before. Some people close to him, including his personal physician, Dr. Ferdy Pacheco, the fight doctor, grew deeply concerned about the amount of punishment Ali was absorbing. Pacheco urged Ali to retire, citing evidence of kidney damage and minor neurological issues. Ali, however, could not walk away, driven by the need for money and the love of the spotlight. This disagreement eventually led Dr. Pacheco to resign in 1977, refusing to be part of Ali's increasingly dangerous career. Losing the title to Leon Spinks. By 1978, Ali was 36, relatively old for a reflex-based heavyweight. In February 1978, he defended his title in Las Vegas against a relative novice, Leon Spinks, a former Olympic gold medalist with only 7 professional fights. Ali, overconfident and undertrained, clearly underestimated Spinks. Spinks, young and aggressive, swarmed Ali for 15 rounds. Ali looked sluggish and tired, relying too heavily on clinching and the ropes. In a huge upset, Leon Spinks won a split decision. Ali had lost the heavyweight championship, becoming three-time champion. Ali was humiliated. He knew he could beat Spinks, and he was determined to prove it. 7 months later, in September 1978, Ali faced Spinks in a massive rematch at the Louisiana Superdome, drawing one of the largest indoor crowds in boxing history. This time, Ali was focused. He trained hard and used smart ring generalship. He used movement early and controlled the pace, avoiding the chaos that defined their first meeting. He won the rematch decisively by unanimous decision. The victory made Muhammad Ali the first man in boxing history to become the heavyweight champion 3 times. It was a record-breaking achievement that further cemented his unique place in the sport. Following this historic win, Ali finally announced his retirement in 1979. He walked away a 3-time champion with an incredible career record. He had nothing left to prove. Or so everyone thought. Chapter 14, One Fight Too Many. Muhammad Ali had retired in 1979 as the only 3-time heavyweight champion in history. He had nothing left to prove. He was a global icon whose life after boxing promised peace, wealth, and continued humanitarian work. Yet, the peace didn't last. The comeback driven by pressure. Ali's lavish lifestyle, combined with poor investments and the generous support of his large family and entourage, quickly depleted his considerable boxing fortune. His retirement didn't last, mostly because of mounting financial pressures. Ali was convinced to return to the ring for one last massive payday. Despite the advice of many friends and doctors who saw the signs of slowing reflexes and slurred speech, Ali decided to mount a second, ill-advised comeback. He believed he still had the magic. His body, however, was telling a different story. The painful defeat to Larry Holmes. The comeback fight was scheduled for October 2, 1980, in Las Vegas. Ali faced his former sparring partner, Larry Holmes, who was now the undefeated WBC heavyweight champion. The build-up to the fight was tinged with sadness. Holmes, who loved and respected Ali, was visibly uncomfortable with the task ahead. Ali, at 38, looked drawn and slow during training. The fight itself was difficult to watch. The old magic was gone. Ali couldn't move, his famous reflexes failed him, and he mostly stood still, absorbing the patient, brutal punishment delivered by Holmes. Ali looked sluggish and frail. He offered little offense and took repeated, heavy blows to the head. Between rounds, Larry Holmes pleaded with his corner not to let the fight continue. Finally, after 10 humiliating and one-sided rounds, Angelo Dundee stopped the fight. It was the first and only time Ali had been defeated by a corner stoppage. The loss was painful because it wasn't a tactical defeat, it was a physical surrender to age and exhaustion. It signaled to the world that Ali was no longer just beaten, he was deteriorating. The final fight. The defeat to Holmes should have been the definitive end, but Ali insisted on one last attempt to prove himself. In December 1981, he traveled to the Bahamas to face obscure heavyweight Trevor Berbick. The fight was disorganized, poorly attended, and lacked the spectacle Ali was famous for. Once again, Ali was slow, ineffective, and unable to summon the speed or power that defined his prime. Ali lost the 10-round decision to Berbick. It was a lackluster, disappointing end to the greatest career in boxing history. Permanent retirement and final record. After the loss to Berbick, Muhammad Ali finally accepted the inevitable and stepped away from the ring for good. His final professional record stood at an astonishing 56 wins and 5 losses. But the cost of those final 2 fights was immense. The punishment absorbed in the latter stages of his career, especially against Holmes, is widely believed to have accelerated the severe health challenges that would soon follow. The boxing career was over. The journey of Muhammad Ali, however, was far from finished. He would now face the greatest fight of his life, one that required courage of an entirely different kind. Chapter 15, The Diagnosis. Early warning signs. The signs that something was fundamentally wrong with Muhammad Ali began to surface almost immediately after his permanent retirement in 1981. Even before the devastating loss to Larry Holmes in 1980, those closest to Ali had noticed changes. His once fluid, rapid-fire speech was becoming noticeably slurred. His movements, though still graceful, were slower and less precise. He began to exhibit slight tremors in his hands, which he often tried to mask in public. At first, these symptoms were sometimes jokingly dismissed as the result of too many punches, or the natural slowing of age. But the concerns were serious, especially for those who remembered the detailed warnings given by his former doctor, Ferdy Pacheco. Ali was experiencing severe physical consequences that went beyond normal retirement. Parkinson's disease diagnosis, 1984. In 1984, 3 years after his last fight, Muhammad Ali was hospitalized for speech and balance issues. After extensive testing, doctors delivered the devastating news: Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's is a progressive neurological disorder that primarily affects movement. It results from the death of dopamine-producing cells in the brain. For Ali, the diagnosis meant a future of increasing muscle rigidity, uncontrollable tremors, and progressive difficulty with walking, balance, and speaking. The debate over causes. The diagnosis immediately ignited a heated debate over the cause. The medical community and boxing critics split into two camps. Boxing-related trauma. Many argued that the disease was a direct result of the hundreds of thousands of blows Ali had absorbed during his career, particularly during his later rope-a-dope phase and the last, punishing comeback fights against Holmes and Berbick. Doctors often cited the condition known as dementia pugilistica, later known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy or CTE, a condition caused by repeated head trauma, which presents with symptoms similar to Parkinson's. Genetic/standard onset. Others argued that Ali's condition was standard, idiopathic, of unknown cause, Parkinson's disease, pointing out that not all boxers develop it and not all Parkinson's patients are boxers. Regardless of the precise medical explanation, the irony was cruel. The man who relied on his dazzling speed, grace, and voice was now afflicted by a disease that systematically stripped him of those very gifts. Coming to terms and public impact. Ali initially wrestled with the diagnosis. His physical strength was failing, but his spirit remained indomitable. For the public, the sight of Ali, shaking, struggling to speak, yet still undeniably charismatic, was heartbreaking. His physical decline softened his often controversial public image. The man who had once terrified the establishment with his mouth now spoke with a quiet humility that resonated globally. The world began to shift its focus from the aggressive fighter to the courageous man battling a terrible disease. Muhammad Ali was now facing his greatest opponent, one he could not knock out or outrun. This final, lifelong fight against Parkinson's would ultimately define the final, most revered chapter of his legacy. Chapter 16, Elder Statesman. A new anchor, Lonnie. In 1986, Muhammad Ali married his fourth wife, Yolanda Lonnie Williams. Lonnie was not only a childhood friend from Louisville but also a college graduate who would become his dedicated manager, anchor, and primary caregiver. Lonnie's disciplined and protective nature was exactly what Ali needed as his Parkinson's symptoms worsened. She took control of his scheduling, his finances, and his medical care, providing the stable foundation that allowed him to continue his public mission despite his physical limitations. Lonnie allowed Ali to focus on his spiritual and charitable work, protecting him from those who sought to exploit his fame or his health. Humanitarian work around the world. With his physical career over, Ali fully embraced his role as a spiritual ambassador. His diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, while tragic, ironically served to humanize him and soften his image in the eyes of the global public. The aggressive lip was replaced by a figure of quiet, struggling dignity. Ali began traveling the world tirelessly, not for boxing matches, but to promote peace, faith, and charitable causes. His fame transcended culture and politics. People who didn't care about boxing knew who he was, and they were drawn to the courage he showed simply by standing up. He used his silence, the one thing the disease couldn't steal from his spirit, as a powerful tool of empathy. The diplomat and peacemaker. One of Ali's most dramatic acts of humanitarian diplomacy occurred in 1990. Just before the Gulf War, Ali personally traveled to Iraq to meet with Saddam Hussein. He went on his own initiative, without official government backing, to try and negotiate the release of 15 American hostages who were being held captive. Ali brought his own supply of Parkinson's medication and stayed until he succeeded. His fame and sincerity persuaded Hussein to release the Americans. This powerful, successful trip solidified his reputation not just as a celebrity, but as a fearless international peacemaker. His humanitarian efforts were officially recognized in 1998 when the United Nations designated him a UN Messenger of Peace, a role in which he worked to eliminate poverty and support young people in developing nations. Ali also dedicated himself to supporting the fight against the disease he battled, raising awareness and funds for Parkinson's research. His courage in the face of his illness became an enduring message of hope for millions. As the years passed, the world stopped seeing Muhammad Ali the controversial boxer and began seeing Muhammad Ali the elder statesman, a figure whose moral conviction had finally matched his legendary physical power. Chapter 17, Reconciliation and Recognition. As the 1990s began, the public's perception of Muhammad Ali had fundamentally changed. Time had validated his controversial stance, and his courageous battle with Parkinson's disease had transformed him from a feared political figure into a universally beloved icon. This era was marked by powerful moments of public and personal reconciliation. Lighting the Olympic Cauldron, 1996. The definitive turning point in Ali's public image occurred in 1996 at the Atlanta Summer Olympics. The world watched in stunned emotion as a visibly trembling Muhammad Ali, ravaged by Parkinson's but radiating immense dignity, appeared in a white tracksuit to light the Olympic cauldron. The moment was electric. The crowd roared in admiration, and millions worldwide were moved to tears. The man who had once been stripped of his Olympic medal, whether real or symbolic, and condemned by his own country was now given the highest honor possible. The act symbolized America's final, public embrace of him as a national hero. Presidential Medal of Freedom, 2005. Official recognition of Ali's contributions to America came in 2005. President George W. Bush presented Ali with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor. The award was given not just for his boxing greatness, but for his courage, conviction, and humanitarian efforts. This award firmly placed Ali in the pantheon of American moral leaders, a profound vindication for the stand he took in 1967. The Ali Frazier reconciliation. On a deeply personal level, one of Ali's most complex relationships was with his great rival, Joe Frazier. The verbal abuse Ali had inflicted on Frazier during their rivalry, particularly before the Thrilla in Manila, created a deep, lasting bitterness in Smokin' Joe. In their later years, however, a quiet, if complex, reconciliation took place. Ali sought to apologize for his cruel words, acknowledging the personal hurt he caused. While their relationship remained strained, they were able to publicly acknowledge the mutual respect they held as warriors. This quiet peace was a necessary closure before Frazier's death in 2011. The Muhammad Ali Center. Further solidifying his legacy as an educator and humanitarian was the opening of the Muhammad Ali Center in his hometown of Louisville. Opened in 2005, the Cultural Center is not merely a museum for boxing memorabilia. It is dedicated to promoting Ali's 6 core principles: confidence, conviction, dedication, giving, respect, and spirituality. It ensures that Ali's story will be remembered not primarily for his fists, but for his character. By the end of this period, the world had corrected its judgment. The former critics and establishment figures who once condemned Cassius Clay now lauded Muhammad Ali. His refusal to compromise his conscience, once a scandal, was now celebrated as the ultimate measure of his greatness. Chapter 18, The Family Man. For a man who lived such a public, disciplined life, Muhammad Ali's private life was complex and large. His love for family was deep, but his fame and multiple marriages created unique and often challenging dynamics for his many children. A large and loving family. Ali had 9 children, 7 daughters and 2 sons, from his multiple relationships. He had 4 children with his second wife, Khalila Ali, Belinda Boyd, daughters Maryam, Rashida, and Jamila, and son Muhammad Jr. Later, he had 2 daughters, Mia and Kalia, from other relationships during that marriage. He had 2 daughters with his third wife, Veronica Portia Ali, Hannah and Layla. Finally, he and his fourth wife, Lonnie Ali, Yolanda Williams, adopted their son, Asad Amin. Despite the often strained relationships between the mothers, Ali made a strong effort to maintain individual bonds with all of his children. He was known to be a playful, loving, and present father when he was home, often engaging in magic tricks, jokes, and storytelling. Layla Ali, carrying the torch. One of his daughters, Layla Ali, took the extraordinary step of following her father into the professional ring. Layla launched a highly successful boxing career in the late 1990s. She was immensely skilled, powerful, and retired undefeated, holding multiple super middleweight titles. Layla's decision was initially met with resistance from her father, who had often spoken against women's boxing. However, he eventually supported her. Layla's career was a powerful symbol of carrying on the Ali legacy, not just the name, but the courage and dominance in the ring. Complex dynamics. The reality of Ali's life, marked by 4 marriages, extensive travel, and intense public scrutiny, inevitably led to complex family dynamics. While the children shared the unparalleled legacy of their father, they often had to navigate the emotional challenges of his fame and his non-traditional family structure. The struggles were real, ranging from financial issues and media intrusion to dealing with the progressive decline of their famous father due to Parkinson's disease. As Ali's physical health worsened in the later years, the children, often led by the steadfast care of Lonnie, banded together to protect and support him. The legacy of the name. For Ali's children, carrying the name Muhammad Ali was both a great burden and an immense privilege. They became, in their own ways, ambassadors of his spirit. Daughters like Maryam Ali dedicated themselves to social work, and Rashida Ali became a prominent advocate for Parkinson's research, often speaking alongside her father. Ali's final, long fight against Parkinson's disease taught his family, and the world, a final, profound lesson, that true strength is not measured by the ability to knock out an opponent, but by the quiet grace and love shown within one's own family, even when facing an unbeatable foe. Chapter 19, Final Years. Declining health and enduring presence. Throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s, Muhammad Ali's health steadily declined. Parkinson's disease is progressive, and the effects became more pronounced. His tremors grew more severe, and his voice, once the most powerful weapon in sports, became a near-inaudible whisper. However, Ali and Lonnie chose not to retreat entirely. Instead, they understood that his very presence was a source of inspiration. Ali continued to make public appearances, often accompanied by Lonnie, who was his constant support. He attended charitable events, posed for photographs, and greeted fans. These appearances transformed him into a living symbol of perseverance, proving that even when one's physical body fails, the spirit can remain undefeated. In the later years, the toll became severe. By 2013, his family confirmed that his Parkinson's had progressed significantly, making travel and even simple movements incredibly difficult. Yet, his eyes, still bright and intelligent, always conveyed the warmth and charisma that defined him. The final bow. Ali's last public appearances were poignant and moving. He was increasingly frail, but his moral stature was never greater. He continued to dedicate his life to supporting causes, often silently fundraising for his center and for Parkinson's research. He spent his final years primarily residing in Arizona, cared for by Lonnie and medical staff. His long battle, a testament to his toughness, was nearing its end. June 3, 2016, the world stops. On June 2, 2016, Muhammad Ali was hospitalized in Scottsdale, Arizona, due to a respiratory illness. The world held its breath one last time, hoping for a miracle comeback. The fight ended the next day. On June 3, 2016, Muhammad Ali died at the age of 74. The news instantly triggered a wave of public mourning across the globe. World leaders, sports figures, activists, and millions of ordinary fans offered tributes. Flags were lowered to half-mast, and the outpouring of grief confirmed that Ali was indeed a transcendent figure whose impact was universal. The Louisville Farewell. Ali's final farewell was held in his hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. The services were meticulously planned, involving multiple days of events designed to honor his Muslim faith and his global legacy. The funeral was a powerful, symbolic event. His casket was driven in a long procession through the streets of Louisville, passing landmarks from his life, including his childhood home and the Muhammad Ali Center. Thousands lined the route, throwing flowers onto the hearse, offering a final, emotional salute. The public memorial service was held at the KFC Center and was attended by a truly diverse array of speakers, including former President Bill Clinton, comedian Billy Crystal, and representatives from various faiths. The speakers reflected every facet of his life. The fighter, the poet, the activist, the Muslim, and the humanitarian. Muhammad Ali's life had been a series of powerful acts of defiance and grace. His death marked the closing of an epic chapter, but the funeral ensured that his spirit, courageous, convicted, and compassionate, would continue to inspire. Chapter 20: The Fighter. Long after the political controversies faded and the humanitarian missions were complete, the fundamental truth about Muhammad Ali remained: he was a boxing genius. He wasn't just a great fighter, he was a revolutionary artist who fundamentally changed the identity of the heavyweight division. A revolutionary style. Ali's technique was a beautiful contradiction. Before him, heavyweight boxers were often slow, flat-footed destroyers, relying on brute force. Ali was different. He brought the speed, grace, and fluidity of a middleweight to the heavyweight class. His famous philosophy, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," was a perfect description of his style. He rarely stood still, using his extraordinary footwork to dance around his opponents, forcing them to expend energy chasing him. His hands-low stance, which terrified critics, was proof of his immense confidence in his reflexes. He would lean back from punches by a fraction of an inch, dodging blows that would knock out other men. Ali's greatest weapon wasn't his right hand, it was his mind, his legs, and his ability to make his opponent look foolish. The master of psychological warfare. Ali perfected psychological warfare as a boxing tool. His trash-talking, his poetry, and his predictions were not just showmanship, they were part of his fight plan. He intimidated opponents, broke their concentration, and often drove them to rage, which made them careless. He defeated men with his mouth before he defeated them with his fists. His strategic genius culminated in the rope-a-dope against George Foreman, a plan that transformed his ability to absorb a punch into an offensive weapon. No other champion in history so effectively used theater, intellect, and physical stamina to win the biggest prizes. An unforgettable legacy. Ali's official final record stood at 56 wins and 5 losses, a stunning tally considering the long exile that robbed him of his physical prime. His statistical legacy is defined by breaking the record to become the only 3-time heavyweight champion in history. His place in boxing history is secured by the 3 fights that make up his enduring legend. Liston, 1964, the shocking upset that proved his skill and launched his controversial persona. Foreman, 1974, the ultimate tactical masterpiece that reclaimed his championship after years of exile. Frazier Trilogy, 1971–1975, the brutal, defining rivalry that pushed him to the absolute limits of human endurance. Ali's influence stretches far beyond his records. He proved that speed and intellect could conquer size and strength in the heavyweight division. Every fast, flashy boxer who followed, from Sugar Ray Leonard to Mike Tyson, drew inspiration from the man who brought beauty and defiance to the sweet science. Ali didn't just win the fight, he made the fight into a global event, ensuring that boxing would never be viewed the same way again. Chapter 21, The Activist. Muhammad Ali's decision to risk his career in 1967 did more than just interrupt his boxing, it established the mold for the socially conscious athlete. His activism was not a side hobby, it was an act of faith and a direct challenge to the American political establishment. The voice of black pride. Ali emerged at a critical time in the civil rights movement. While leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. preached integration, Ali embraced the radical separationist ideals of the Nation of Islam, NOI. His public rejection of the name Cassius Clay as a slave name and his conversion to Islam was a powerful, uncompromising declaration of black self-determination and pride. He was the first superstar athlete to publicly and unapologetically link his success to black identity. His refusal to conform to the media's image of a safe or acceptable black champion made him a revolutionary figure for black youth who were tired of incremental change. The cost of conviction. Ali's defining moment came with his refusal of the draft for the Vietnam War. He stood on the principle that his religious faith forbade fighting in a war that he viewed as unjust, declaring, "No Viet Cong ever called me an *****************. The immediate cost of this conviction was devastating. He was stripped of his championship title. His boxing license was revoked in every state. He was convicted of a felony and faced a 5-year prison sentence. He sacrificed the prime years of his athletic career, age 25 to 28, and millions of dollars. This choice, putting conscience above career, is the ultimate proof of his integrity as an activist. His speaking tour during his exile became a core part of the anti-war movement, using his celebrity not for financial gain, but to further a political cause. The vindication of history. Ali was called a traitor in 1967. By the 1970s, as the Vietnam War became deeply unpopular, public opinion began to shift. The Supreme Court overturning his conviction in 1971 was not just a legal victory, but a public vindication of his stand. History ultimately proved Ali right. The once radical notion that athletes had a right to speak out became widely accepted. He didn't just win fights, he won the moral argument, proving that true heroism often lies in defying power rather than serving it. Inspiring athlete activism. Ali set the ultimate precedent for athlete activism. His courage inspired generations of socially conscious athletes, from NFL players taking a knee in protest to NBA stars speaking out on racial justice. He was the first to show that an athlete's platform could be leveraged into a political weapon, even if it meant risking everything. In his life as an activist, Muhammad Ali transformed himself from a controversial figure into a powerful moral symbol. He taught the world that the most important fight an athlete ever takes part in is the one fought for dignity and justice. Chapter 22, The Global Icon. Muhammad Ali's fame didn't just span the United States, it reached every corner of the planet. He was perhaps the first true, universally recognized global celebrity, a figure who transcended sports, politics, and nationality. A global phenomenon. Ali's defiance was often condemned in America, but it was celebrated internationally. In developing nations and newly independent countries, particularly across Africa and Asia, Ali was hailed as a symbol of anti-colonial resistance and black liberation. When he fought in Kinshasa, Zaire, for the "Rumble in the Jungle," he was embraced as a hero who had returned to his roots. He used his fame as an unofficial ambassador. When he converted to Islam, he became a hero across the Muslim world. His travels as a humanitarian in the 1980s and 90s only deepened this connection. Regardless of language or political system, people saw in Ali a man who stood up to power, and they respected him for it. His face, handsome, expressive, and later, marked by dignity, was universally recognized. Cultural impact and style. Ali didn't just dominate his sport, he dominated popular culture. He was a walking poem, a revolutionary in style, and a figure of mesmerizing charisma. His impact can be seen across the arts. Poetry, his spontaneous rhymes introduced a kind of swaggering, street-smart poetry into the mainstream. He taught the world that words could be as powerful as punches. Media, he was one of the first athletes to truly master the media, turning every interview and press conference into must-watch theater. He controlled his own narrative, forcing the press to follow his lead. Film and books, his life inspired countless documentaries, including the Oscar-winning When We Were Kings, and numerous feature films and books. His story became a mythological touchstone for themes of redemption and conviction. The Ali brand. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, Ali's image became a global commercial brand, symbolizing courage, authenticity, and endurance. Even after his death, his image is used to market products worldwide, a testament to the fact that his name transcends any single product or era. The contradiction between the fierce, controversial fighter of the 1960s and the gentle, trembling humanitarian of his later years is what makes his global legacy so powerful. He became a living example that people can evolve, learn, and reconcile. Muhammad Ali's story is a mirror reflecting the major social and political battles of his time. He came to represent the fight for dignity everywhere, ensuring that long after the ringside cheering faded, his name would remain synonymous with courage, conviction, and greatness on a truly global scale. Chapter 23: The Complex Man. Muhammad Ali was a figure of absolute conviction, yet his personal life was marked by profound contradictions. To understand his legacy fully, one must accept that the man known as the greatest was also deeply human, flawed, and constantly evolving. The contradictions in faith. Ali's religious journey was sincere but complex. He joined the Nation of Islam, NOI, at a time when its teachings promoted strict discipline, black separatism, and powerful moral authority. This faith gave him the courage to sacrifice his career. However, his later life involved another spiritual evolution. After the death of Elijah Muhammad, Ali eventually transitioned from the NOI's teachings to practicing Sunni Islam, the largest branch of the faith. This transition softened his political rhetoric and allowed him to embrace a more universal, tolerant, and spiritual vision of his religion, which fueled his global humanitarian efforts. The man who once preached separation spent his later life promoting global unity. Treatment of women and multiple marriages. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of Ali's private life was his treatment of women and his complicated marital history. He was married 4 times, and his pursuit of extramarital relationships resulted in multiple children outside of his marriages. The man who championed dignity and respect for his race often failed to extend that same consistent respect to the women in his life. His early relationships were often strained by the demanding, puritanical rules of the NOI, which he enforced strictly on his wives while frequently failing to adhere to them himself. Analyzing Ali requires acknowledging the gulf between his powerful public principles and his sometimes chaotic private actions as a husband and partner. Financial and business dealings. For a man who earned millions, Ali faced persistent financial struggles. Despite the huge paydays, he lacked sophisticated financial management. He was often overly generous, supporting a large entourage and family, and falling victim to poor business advice and bad investments. The pressure to earn money was a key factor in his disastrous, ill-advised comebacks against Larry Holmes and Trevor Berbick. Even in his retirement, the fight for financial stability haunted him, proving that his charisma and fame could not insulate him from the practical realities of life. The public persona versus private person. The greatest contradiction was often the divide between the Louisville lip and the man at home. The public persona was loud, rhyming, and arrogant, a necessary showman to sell tickets and fight injustice. The private person, however, was often quiet, gentle, and deeply insecure, especially early in his life. He was a devout Muslim who loved playing jokes, a serious activist who loved magic tricks, and a global icon who remained terrified of flying. Ali's enduring appeal lies precisely in these flaws and his humanity. His story is not just a tale of victory but a tale of growth, a journey from the narcissistic young champion to the humble, compassionate figure who used his illness not as an excuse, but as a final, quiet platform for peace. He was, in the truest sense, a complex man who, despite his imperfections, spent his life striving to embody the greatness he always claimed. Conclusion: more than a boxer. We began this journey by looking at the transformation of a young man named Cassius Clay, and now, having witnessed the tumultuous, spectacular arc of his life, we can fully appreciate the meaning of Muhammad Ali. His story wasn't a single narrative, it was a trilogy of lives, each phase more impactful than the last. The synthesis of 3 lives. First, there was the boxer. Ali redefined the sweet science, transforming the heavyweight division from a brute force contest into a ballet of speed, skill, and psychological warfare. He proved that intellect and movement could conquer sheer size, leaving behind a legacy of iconic fights, from the stunning upset over Liston to the ultimate triumph in the Rumble in the Jungle. He was a revolutionary artist, and his place as the greatest fighter is undisputed. Next came the activist. This phase required far more courage than any bout. By trading his fame and fortune for his conviction, Ali forced the world to reckon with the moral hypocrisy of segregation and the injustice of the Vietnam War. His refusal to step forward for the draft became a defining moment of the civil rights and anti-war movements. He showed the world that true heroism is found not in obedience, but in the willingness to sacrifice everything for one's principles. Finally, we met the humanitarian. Stripped of his voice and his mobility by Parkinson's disease, Ali's greatness transcended his physical body. The tremors and the whispers of his final years became a new, powerful message of grace and perseverance. He became a global ambassador of peace, revered worldwide for his compassion, proving that the deepest strength lies in the spirit, not the fist. The meaning of the greatest. Muhammad Ali's life was a mirror reflecting the major social and political battles of the 20th century. He was controversial, complex, and sometimes deeply flawed, especially in his personal life. But it is this very complexity, the journey from the brash Louisville lip to the humble man lighting the Olympic cauldron, that makes his story so enduring. His relevance to contemporary issues remains sharp. In an age where athletes are increasingly using their platforms to speak on social justice, Ali provides the blueprint, the courage, and the consequence of taking a stand. He taught the world that fame should be used as a moral loudspeaker. Ali's own words often provided the best insight into his philosophy. He didn't just want to be remembered for his wins, he spoke of using his championship to help my people, to feed the hungry, and to unite the world. The ultimate measure of Muhammad Ali is not his 56 wins, nor the championship belts he held. It is the profound and permanent effect he had on culture, courage, and conscience. He wasn't just a boxer who got involved in activism, he was an activist who used boxing to demand his freedom, his identity, and his right to define himself. He shook up the world in 1964, and the ripples of that shock are felt today. He remains, and will forever be, the greatest. You've heard the story of a champion who defied the world with his fists and his voice. Now, prepare to meet a different kind of titan, one who built an empire with his mind and his money. If you enjoyed the detailed journey through Ali's life, you won't want to miss our next biography on Warren Buffett, the legendary Oracle of Omaha. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into the principles and decisions that made him one of the wealthiest people in history. Like and subscribe to EchoLib for more in-depth biographies.